I'm Peter Vella. I'm the Director for the Malta Tourism Authority for UK and Ireland. And I'm here also actually to introduce my colleague here, Tabone, who's the Director for the Valletta 18 Foundation. She'll be talking a lot longer than I will be about Valletta 18. We're the two Maltese people in the room. I am Maltese, although a lot of people don't believe me, but I am Maltese. In fact, 5% of the population share my surname, which can be a bit confusing. Just before we start, I don't know how many of you have been to Malta before, or even Valletta, but if it's been a long time ago, you'll find massive changes since then. In fact, I wish I'd bought some property in Valletta 10 years ago, because back then it was nothing like the city is today, and prices are absolutely soaring. I read this morning in the press that there are 98 applications that have gone in to the planning department this year for boutique hotels, of which around 20 of them are actually in Valletta, where they're taking over the old palazzos that were built by the Knights of St John and turning them into stunning boutique hotels. And these are palazzos that are Baroque, built in the 16th century. In fact, the city itself was built by the Knights of St John back in the 16th century, and Disraeli described it as a city built by gentlemen for gentlemen. It's the first city in the world that was built on a grid system. It's fortified all the way around, and it's bordered by what many would regard as being the finest natural harbour in the world, the Grand Harbour, fights it with Sydney, truly stunning. And collectively, it has 320 historic monuments, but it only occupies a third of the square mile. So it's a fantastic place to go, great agriculture. So I think, maybe without any further talk about Valletta, I don't want to take away Catherine's thunder. Catherine Tabone, as I say, the Director for the Valletta Foundation.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everybody for finding time to join us tonight. I'm Catherine Tabone, as Peter said, and I'm the Executive Director of the Valletta 2018 Foundation. As you may have heard, next year Valletta will host the European Capital of Culture title, and I'm taking care that everything runs smoothly for next year and that everything is in place. I want to tell you that I'm very happy to be here in Ireland. I visited Ireland for about 5 times already, and I absolutely love this place. I visited Dublin, Cork, Galway, Connemara, Mayo. I've been all around the island and I am absolutely in love with it. So Malta is also beautiful. We don't perhaps have the greenery that Ireland has, but we have the sun, as you've seen in the video. We have the sea, we have very warm temperatures, but we also have a huge dose of history and culture. So I want to underline that Malta and Valletta are not just destinations for summer, they are destinations for the entire year, especially next year in 2018, because we have the privilege to host, as I mentioned before, the European Capital of Culture. And there aren't many European capitals of culture that are also World Heritage Sites. Valletta is a World Heritage Site recognized by UNESCO, and next year we have around 400 cultural events, so that's more than one event per day. And we are involving around 1,000 artists and creative practitioners from Malta and from abroad to make this happen. We wanted to make sure that we have a cultural program that reflects our history, but also our aspirations for the future. Our cultural program is online, so if you Google Valletta 2018 cultural program, you will find all the activities and you can go through all the activities and see which ones interest you best, so that I will see you in Malta hopefully for these events. But it's not just about that, it's also about legacy, and it's also about cultural infrastructure. So I will go through this one step at a time, and I'll just explain briefly 4 of our main events. As I said, everything else is online, so you can just go and have a look at it when you're at home having your tea or having your Guinness. So I'll just go through the 4 main events. So one of the largest events is happening shortly, and it's our opening. The opening is happening throughout a week from the 14th till the 21st of January, with the opening night, with the official opening night being on the 20th of January. And we're having 4 shows in the 4 main squares in and around Valletta, with the main show being held in the Triton Square. I don't know how many of you have been to Valletta already, but those who have, I'm sure that you are aware that before you go into Valletta, there's this huge square with a beautiful fountain that has been undergoing restoration for quite some time. And the fountain has now been restored in time for our opening to take place. So that is our main event for the opening, and we're very excited to do that. And the opening will be on rotation. So if someone misses one show in one square, they can go and see it when the next hour, I don't know, if they miss the 6 p.m. show, they can go for the 7 p.m. show and they won't miss anything. So that is the opening. Then we are also producing a movie, because I should say that our artistic director for the main events has around 400 hours, no, that's much more actually, 4,000 hours of credits to his name in Hollywood and Canada. So we're making use of his expertise, and he's producing a movie about something very topical in Malta, which we hope to see presented in festivals all over Europe and also beyond. Then in June we have the Pageant of the Seas. As you know, Malta is an island, so we want to pay homage to the sea that surrounds us and that makes up our society. As a society, we are of course molded and shaped by the sea and by the trade connections and influences that have reached us over the sea through the past centuries. So it will be our homage and our thanksgiving to the sea. And it will also feature some traditional boat races that are very famous in Malta. So it's also something very traditional and anthropological. And that's in June. Then, of course, we want to underline a topic that is always connected to the sea. Unfortunately, it's not always a positive topic, but we don't see why we shouldn't also discuss things that concern today's society. So we are having an opera, a contemporary opera, composed by a Maltese composer, with a libretto that underlines the plight of displaced people. So, unfortunately, the Mediterranean is a house for very sad happenings and people losing their lives when they are looking towards hope and looking towards a new beginning. And we wanted to introduce that discourse into a cultural event. It is something that we hold very much at heart, and we want to discuss not just with words, but with music. And sometimes music gets through things that people are afraid to say and that people don't feel comfortable in discussing. And we hope that this opera will breach that subject and make it a conversation and make it a source of inspiration and hope for these people who are looking for a better future ahead. Then, of course, we have the closing in December. But just to add to the 4 main events, this is a little extra one that I can't not mention really. We have a spectacular visual arts, contemporary visual arts exhibition held mostly in public spaces and in locations which are not normally accessible. So, any of you history buffs would know that underneath Valletta there is a huge maze of tunnels that was built by the order, and nobody ever gets to see them. I don't know if there's any lucky one here who has actually been inside those tunnels. I haven't myself, unfortunately, but I will be able to through this exhibition, because one of our installations, it's a visual and oral installation will be held in one of these tunnels. So we are opening these tunnels to the people, and that way I can see the tunnels myself as well. Why not? I just want to let you know also that I read history, so these things are very important to my heart, and all the historic and places that have connections with the past are very important for me. You are seeing here the Co-Cathedral of St. John's. It's possibly one of the most beautiful churches in the world. I don't know how many of you have been there, but if you haven't, you really must go. It's something you can't afford to miss when you're in Malta, and it's something that you will only see once in your life. And speaking of historical places, I just want to mention 2 projects, actually 3. I won't be long, but I have to tell you about the most exciting things, really. 2 projects that are very much connected with historical places. So, as a foundation, it's not just our remit to come up with and implement a cultural program, but it's also our remit to create the necessary infrastructure for the cultural sector to flourish. Culture is a very important contributor to the Maltese economy, so government is investing very heavily in it. So we wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and we decided to set up the new National Museum of Fine Arts in a historic place, the Auberge d'Italie, which used to serve before as the Ministry for Tourism. So we are taking back the National Museum of Fine Arts to the Auberge d'Italie, which hosted the National Museum of Fine Arts in the 30s. So we're giving back a space, a cultural and historical space, to the public. We are also doing that for the Valletta Design Cluster. So we are building the space which would provide a place to work for startups, for design startups, until they are established enough to spread their wings and fly and leave the space for somebody else. And where are we going to set that up? Well, we chose an abandoned building that was derelict and dilapidated for a long, long time. It was infested by rats, unfortunately, and it was inhabited by squatters. And it used to be, back in the time of the knights, the abattoir. So we decided to take this place, restore it, and transform it into this space for creative arts and creative thought to flourish. And in the process, we are not just restoring the building itself, but we are restoring also the facades of the houses that are connected to the building. So the entire area will be given a fresh new look. And we are also trying to make the people who live in that area more comfortable and more happy in living in that area. Unfortunately, that area, which is to the lower end of Valletta, carried a certain stigma. It was left to its own devices for a number of years, many years actually, and people there felt that they didn't belong. So we are making that space accessible to them as well, and I'll tell you how. So, those of you who have been to Valletta know that there aren't many trees in Valletta. So we are installing a roof garden, and we hope to set an example to other houses and other boutique hotels and other buildings, government entities, non-government organizations, etc., to follow our example. And this roof garden will be accessible to the people living in the area. So they can just go, have a coffee, talk to their friends, and enjoy themselves there. So we are really trying to bring together environmental consciousness and accessibility and creative innovation and economy and restoration all in one through this project. When it comes to talking about things we are doing outside of Valletta, because I have to let you know that even though the Capital of Culture title belongs to Valletta, it is shared with all the other locations of Malta. Because when the bid took place, I don't know, some 6-7 years ago, something unique happened. All the other places in Malta did not compete, but they pitched behind Valletta for the bid. So the title belongs to Valletta, but it is shared with everyone else. So we want to make sure that our influence is felt even beyond the walls of the capital city. So we have the Malta International Contemporary Arts Space. It is also being set up in a place that belonged to the Knights of St. John, the Hospizio. And we hope to see creative innovation happen there as well. And we hope to see the most important contemporary visual artists exhibit their installations there. One last project I want to talk to you about, a project that is very close to my heart, is the regeneration of Straight Street. Now, for those of you who do not know, Straight Street had a very particular reputation for a certain type of entertainment, if you get my meaning. And that entertainment was to accommodate the needs of sailors, mostly British ones. So when British sailors left Malta, when Malta was no longer a British colony, the demand decreased. So the street fell into disuse, and after a while, it also had associated with it a particular stigma. So I remember when I was a young girl, my mother used to tell me, you can't walk through Straight Street alone. It doesn't look good if you go through Straight Street alone. You should avoid the place entirely. And I remember once I disobeyed her orders and I went in Straight Street, and it was like a ghost town. It was really black and nothing was happening. It was quite scary actually. But the Valletta 2018 Foundation has invested heavily in Straight Street, and with the regeneration of the entire capital city, the street is now teeming. It's teeming with life. People after 5, after work, go and have drinks in the old historical bars. They enjoy themselves. They drink wine, they drink whiskey, they have a snack. They stay there through the night, in the weekends especially, up to the early morning hours. And we wanted to make sure that the people who would be sitting there having their wine and eating their fries would also have a dose of culture. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We know that the place is very, very much frequented. I think it's the most frequented street in Valletta. So we wanted to make sure that people there would have access to something happening outside in the street, something which perhaps they wouldn't otherwise have wanted to see particularly or to listen to particularly. So we have installed an artistic director for Straight Street, and he is doing a wonderful job. So I'll just give you 2 small examples. First of all, he did this open-air monologue by Dario Fo. So people having their drink are listening to Dario Fo, are listening to an actor speaking out the lines of Dario Fo. Dario Fo is high literature. I'm sure you know who Dario Fo is. And Dario Fo is usually, recitals of Dario Fo are held in theatres, usually. They're not held in the street where people are drinking and having fun. And in this way, we are opening areas of culture that are not normally accessed by a certain sector of society. That's one example. And the other one, the artistic director, who is very, very creative, has come up with 2 operas, Carmen by Bizet and Turandot by Puccini. Those of you who, like me, love opera and classical music would certainly know what I'm talking about. But he gave them a different interpretation musically. So he turned Turandot into a jazz performance, and he turned Carmen into a performance by Anneia. Now, you wouldn't know what Anneia are. The closest thing I can think of is troubadours. So basically, they are mostly men. There are some women, but mostly men, who play the guitar and recite verses. Sometimes they recite verses in a way that's teasing, that's a bit naughty, but they are real artists. So they took up Carmen and they did these verses. At that time, they read the script, and at the time they came up with all these verses at the top of the mind. And that was happening outside, and everybody was listening to it, and everybody was looking at it, and people were just flocking to see what all this was about. And people who watched Carmen and Turandot later went on to watch operas in theatres. People who would never have thought of listening to an opera or classical music. So that's something that I'm really, really happy of, and I'm really, really proud of, even because it's part of the legacy that Valletta 2018 wants to leave. Now, what will happen when 2018 is over? Will all this die? Will it go back to the way it was before? No. Government has, as part of its plans, the creation of the Valletta Cultural Agency, which will take over the work that was conducted by the Valletta 2018 Foundation, and making sure that it goes beyond 2018, that what we have achieved is not lost, and that we continue to build bridges, not walls, through culture. So, essentially, that's the gist of what next year will be about. I'm sorry if I took a bit long, but there are so many things that I want to talk to you about, and it's very difficult to take the gist of it, but I hope to have given you a taster of what you will see if you come to Valletta next year. I really hope that you do come to Valletta next year, because it's something that will not take place again for many, many, many years. It will be a year of activity, a year of colour, a year of vibrancy, and a year of enjoyment. So please do come and visit us and have a taste of what Maltese culture is about. Now, I'm sure that many of you are taking pictures, so please have this hashtag with them, #Valletta 2018. Thank you very much.